I think that's probably the number one reason. The fact that people at Harmonix, like we know more about music because we are musicians. We know more about how to play, and I think that we're more interested in being authentic. We wanted to make sure that the songs that you were playing, it was closest to how they actually sounded in game. Or the closest to what the original recording was. And we've always tried to be faithful to that. I think that we're exceptionally interested in making sure that we're giving our fans what they want, and our fans have responded very, very positively to this kind of, this authentic dedication to music. It's not always, we call it like gamifying a little bit, like it's not making a song hard just to make a song hard. It's sometimes the idea that just the song as it was originally recorded is the most powerful thing, and so we want to be true to that music. That added a lot more time. Yeah. So from start to finish, like licensing is usually the part that takes the longest. For us we have to contact a label or a band and get their permission to use the song, and then we sometimes have to wait, and sometimes we wait a long time. Beatles, Rock Band, for example, we waited almost 2 years before we got all of that ready. Bands have a lot of other things happening, and so we're lucky to be able to work with them. But yeah, from licensing, we ask the bands and labels if we can request their songs, and then we have to get the original masters. The bands have to provide us with the original master recordings so we can break out the stems for each instrument part, so we can offer them for the game. It's another way that Harmonix has always been focused on that kind of authentic gameplay, making sure that things sound as good as they possibly can. And then once we get everything in-house, we separate the tracks as well, and then we make some additional tweaks for gameplay. Sometimes we don't always get the recordings the way they sounded on the album. Sometimes we get them unedited, unproduced, so we have to sometimes make some changes to gameplay as well. And then we start authoring. We say, all right, this is what the song sounds like, this is what it should look like in-game in terms of note charts. And then once we have it authored, then we start testing it. And that's people who sit in a room and play Rock Band on Expert all day long to make sure that the game doesn't break, to make sure, does this feel good on Expert? Okay, well then we move down to hard. Does it feel good on hard? We move down to medium. And so we have to make sure that it feels good on every difficulty level and on every instrument as well. And then you submit it to Microsoft and Sony, and then it's several weeks before they publish it to their store, and that's when it shows up in game. So on average, for any given song, depending on how long licensing takes, 6 to 9 months from start to finish for a lot of these songs. But the team working on the songs in the office, they are very, very good. They are people that have been working on these music games for 5, 10, 15 years. So they have a ton of experience. So sometimes they can get a song and they can chart it and they can get it ready to publish in a matter of weeks. So if they have to, they can really push through a song very, very quickly. There was a time and a place for single band music games. I don't think we have any plans to release more individual band music games. Certainly not anytime in the near future. We're focused on Rock Band 4 entirely. But when you get a chance to work with the Beatles, there's so much material to work with, and not just musical material. The look of the band, the history of the band, that personal relationship. It's almost like a mythology. Like they are almost like modern mythical characters. So to be able to work with them was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. And so we're unbelievably proud of Beatles Rock Band. It's something that I still can't watch that opening cinematic without getting a little bit choked up. It's just, and I did not like the Beatles when I started working at Harmonix and when I started working on Beatles Rock Band. I thought that it was old people music. I like punk, I like metal, I want fast songs. But the more I played the Beatles Rock Band and started to gain an appreciation for their skill and their passion and the kind of reactions they get from other people, I did demos for Beatles Rock Band in Studio 2 at Abbey Road, where the Beatles recorded those songs. And it's hard to be in that position and not feel that emotion, to feel how powerful that is. And I think that that's really what the Beatles and Beatles Rock Band means to people, that kind of emotion. Not really. It was very interesting seeing how people responded to DLC. Obviously, like when we released songs from big bands, the early Metallica DLC is a good example. Like Metallica is a huge band, so obviously that sold very well. The Who is another band where they're not exactly in the same category as Metallica. Metallica is like an 80s and 90s heavy metal band, and the Who is more of a late 60s, 70s classic rock, but they were both incredibly popular. I think that people really focused on songs that were fun to play in game. And the more that we were able to offer DLC previews and let people see a little bit of what songs looked like, and the more that we were able to show off at live shows or on YouTube or on live streams, show people what the songs looked like, they would say, that song looks like it will be fun to play. So that's something that's pretty consistent, whether it's been 90s pop rock bands or whether it's 70s classic rock bands, male vocalists or female vocalists. I think the common thread is that those were songs that were really fun and interesting to play. How do we pick songs for Rock Band 4? It's usually a lot of people sitting in a room yelling at each other. We listen very closely to our community, of course. Rockband.com/request is the tool that we put on our website in March. And in the last 3 months, we've had nearly 1 million requests, which is quite a few. And that's incredibly helpful for us to be able to go to bands and labels and say, look at how many people want you in the game. Look at how badly the fans want you to be in Rock Band. A good example is Avenged Sevenfold, Hail to the King, one of the 6 songs that we've already announced for Rock Band 4. Out of the 1 million song requests, that was one of the 10 most requested songs. So that we were able to listen to the fans' requests, and that we were able to go to the label and go to the band and ask them to be a part of Rock Band 4, that's how helpful song requests can be. So if people want to hear specific songs, that's always a useful tool. We, of course, have our own personal favorite bands. We know a lot about what people liked playing in old Rock Band games, and we're all fans of music, so we know what bands are popular right now, what bands have never been in music games before, what bands have never been in Rock Band before. So we're always looking for new bands, and we really do try to curate it almost in the same way that you curate a mixtape that you make for a friend, where you say like, all right, I know you love this song, but you don't know this band, but they sound a lot like this other band. Check them out, you're gonna love them. So we always look for a good mix of songs, old songs from the 60s and 70s, more modern songs from the 2000s, 2010s. We look for songs from different genres, so we have a good mix. And we look for songs that are, by huge bands, and maybe bands that aren't huge yet, but are getting bigger and that we think people should know more about. So we look at all of those factors. We look at what our fans ask for. We look at songs that would be the most fun to play in game too. And then we reach out to the bands and labels, and sometimes we ask for one song and they say, well, what about this other song instead? And sometimes we do that, and sometimes we put together a pack and we release that as DLC. So it's a really interesting process where everyone is, of course, very passionate about their songs, and everyone sits in rooms and they argue and they say, well, I want this song by this band. And it's like, well, that band is great, but we should do this song instead. So there's a lot of, it's probably a lot like the fan discussions where they argue about what band is best.